Well, good morning. And after a great struggle, we've managed to conquer the system. The computer does not rule. Good morning, Richard.
Morning, Keith. May I apologise to you and your loyal listener and his dog for my failure to get here on time. I had to deal with something that arose in a case of mine, and these things. I think it's why barristers end up. It's a bit like doctors. Barristers marry other barristers because I spent most of my adult life apologising to people for not being there on time because something has arisen.
Well, you chose the right morning to be late because the whole gubbins went crazy. And,
right, okay.
So we've only just managed it. And in fact, I have
Well,
to
those are my Russian friends who sorted that out, Keith. Don't worry. That was
right. Yes, they're probably having a go at us this morning. So apologies to our viewers, but also just to explain to you that our look at the headlines this morning has been put off till 9:30 because Richard was available to give us another insight, and he says it's pretty gory. So we better do a disclaimer. Lots of blood and guts and all sorts of things this morning. So really, over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Keith. Yes, some unattractive aspects to this, but I thought it was something that people might be interested in because it was a case of local interest at the time. And having looked back, I was deeply concerned to see that it was a case that went back to 2004. I must have been at primary school then, surely. But I was, in fact, the prosecution junior. I was part of the prosecution team in the prosecution of Graham Coots. Now, he lived in Brighton with his partner, and his partner was, in fact, pregnant at the time. And his partner's best friend, with whom they were both friends, was Jane Longhurst. So what I want to talk to you about today is the murder of Jane Longhurst, which I was involved, not in the murder. I promise you that I've got, but in terms of the trials of it, and the three of them were very good friends. Jane had a long-term partner as well, and the four of them were in fact friends. But as I say, Graham Coots, was a local musician. He played in a tribute band to The Who, and he also sold cleaning equipment door to door just to make ends meet. But he was perfectly respectable on the face of it. No previous convictions. Nobody thought anything wrong of him. But he had a dark secret. And his dark secret, and this is where it does get slightly gory. So just give people a moment to think about it. He was also interested in necrophilia. That is, being in the company of and potentially having some form of sexual contact with dead people. Necrophiliac, dead love. Stop me, Keith, if I go too far. Nobody knew that. Not even his partner knew that. Absolutely no question at all that anybody knew anything about this. But he was, in fact, at the time, we're talking early, as I say, it was 2003, March 2003, that the events we're concerned about. He was paying for websites to be able to access images. A lot of the images that he had, I feel slightly scarred because I've seen the stuff he had on his computer. A lot of them were fake images, very clearly fake images of people, of women purporting to be killed, typically by strangulation. That was a particular fetish that he had. But also some real images, I hate to say it, but some very real images, including, for example, images from concentration camps that he chose to access for his own pleasure. Anyway, nobody knew that about him. He was a perfectly nice fellow. They all got on together, all four of them. And on this March morning, Jane phoned up to see if her friend was available. But she wasn't, in fact. Her friend had been called into work unexpectedly. So she spoke to Graham, and they were friends, and they'd been out, not in any way, and I make it absolutely clear that even Graham Coote said there was never anything sexual between them prior to this point. So there's no suggestion that she was seeking him out. But he said, well, look, why don't we go down to the King Alfred? Why don't we go swimming together, as we have done in the past? And she said, yes, what a great idea. And he said, I'll come and pick you up. And he went and picked her up. And when he went to pick her up, he then said, hold it a minute, I just need to pop home to our flat where I live with your best friend, just off the seafront in Brighton. And so they went in there. Now, that's when things differ between what he said and what the truth is, because his account was that for some inexplicable reason, when they got into his flat, Jane got upset. She was crying. He hugged her, and they went to bed together. And he said this was all without any conversation between them. So this was simply, it happened. She didn't say a word. He says that, in fact, Jane enjoyed what's called, it's got different titles, but sex control play. So in other words, asphyxiation. If you do it yourself, it's called auto asphyxiation, but it's alleged that if you constrict the neck during a sexual experience, that can enhance the pleasure. Keith, I've never tried that with you, and I don't think I ever would. But he said that.
Thank God for that.
No, he said that during the course of that, he had used a pair of her tights to constrict her neck when she was above him, and that suddenly she dropped down dead, and he panicked. Now, during the course of there were two trials, and I'll come on to that in a moment, but the pathologist, probably the most eminent pathologist in the country, who came and gave evidence, said that that was just nonsense. There are different ways of constricting the neck causing death. You can block the airway, but that's the most difficult thing, to actually block the throat. You can do something to the jugular vein, which can cause death. But the way that the defense were proposing was that it was a very sharp shock to the vein that, the nerve that goes down from the brain to the heart. And it's a bit like that thing of the sort of the killer chop to the side of the neck, and it can happen. It's called the vagus nerve, and so that was the suggestion. In fact, what the eminent pathologist said was that simply couldn't be the case, and we had a lively debate about that, if I can put that in court, as to what caused her death. Because what we concluded prosecuting this case was that, in fact, he'd got behind her. He'd put his arm around her neck like that, and he had strangled her. And I'll tell you why we came to that conclusion in a moment. But he then had a dead body. And obviously it's exactly what he wanted. He wanted a dead body in his house. We were able to recover, because he kept them as trophies, his shirt that he was wearing with blood on it, consistent with that process. And he also kept as a trophy her personal belongings. And perhaps most damningly, he kept a condom, which we were able to show had her DNA on the outside and his DNA on the inside. We could never prove exactly when he had used that condom with her body. Anyway, this is this isn't the most cheeriest of topics, but it's quite important, I suppose. He then had a problem because he had a body and he had a partner coming home. And so he stuck her in the cellar for a couple of days and then realized he couldn't keep her there. So he went to a storage company just on the Lewis Road in Brighton, and he hired a unit there. And he got some boxes from them, and he put her and all the effects that I've talked about, the shirt, the condom, her personal things, and put them in this unit. And she was missing and nobody knew where she was. And obviously the police got involved, and very unfortunately, of course, as always happens with a murder or a possible disappearing person, the police will look at those closest to the person. And so her partner came under suspicion. It obviously wasn't him, but he went through that awful process, poor man, as well as losing his partner. He went through that as well. And it wasn't the police's fault. They were just trying to find out where the truth lay. And the truth lay in that storage company on the Lewis Road in Brighton. And Coots, I called him Graham earlier, I'm going to call him Coots from now on. He went back and visited that unit for about 6 weeks. And we don't know what he did there. But we do know that he upgraded his access to that facility to 24 hours a day so that he could go in on his own when there was nobody there, no employee there. And do whatever he felt he needed to do. Now, there were two bits of really important evidence that caught him, because he was just a friend, you know, as I say, perfectly respectable. There was no reason to think that there was anything about him that would link him with the disappearance of Jane. Two bits of evidence are these. The first is this, that the manager of the facility noticed that there was an odor within the building, and he thought it might be a pigeon in the air conditioning or something like that. And then after Easter, because that was the time it was, after the Easter break, he came back in and found that that had gone. It wasn't there. So he very cleverly, and you know, it's very much to his credit, just a member of the public, he checked his CCTV, and we had the most compelling CCTV, which was Coots with a pallet truck taking a box out of that facility in the middle of the night. It was a big box. You don't need me to tell you what was in it. And he drove it to West Sussex, and there he burnt the body. But the second point is this, is when he burnt the body with the boxes, and there were various boxes, it didn't completely burn. And one of those boxes, just a bit of it was left, about that size, belonged to a company who provided cleaning equipment that was sold door to door. And a police officer, just an ordinary police officer again, no, you know, we're not talking Inspector Morse here, who just went back around, because now they knew that Jane had sadly died. They were making further inquiries just to see if anybody knew anything further. A police officer went around to that flat, the flat where she had been killed, in order to talk to Coots and his partner. And this officer very astutely noticed that there were stacked up by the front door, flat pack, a lot of boxes from that very same cleaning company. And I don't know how that officer felt at the time, but I can well imagine. And he just said, sorry, just excuse me a moment. I just need to go make a phone call. And his phone call obviously was to his colleagues to say, come here, we've got him. As indeed they had. And then he was arrested, and he was tried in 2004 in Lewes Crown Court, in Court 3 in Lewes, and the trial went on for a little while. He maintained his story that this was just an accident during the course of consensual sex. And as I say, the prosecution said, no, you're talking rubbish here, mate. And he said that he panicked, and therefore that's why he dealt with the body in the way he had, and it was nothing to do with anything else. And of course we got, and I was quite involved in this aspect of the case because it's early days of computers, and no disrespect to slightly older people who are involved in the case, they had no real understanding of they had no real understanding of the way the internet worked. So I spent a lot of time with computer experts sorting out all the material that he had on his computer. And at the time, 2004, when he was tried, in general, what's called bad character evidence, that is evidence of previous misconduct in some way, or things that could be deemed as misconduct, wasn't generally admitted as evidence. And we did get some of it in. So there was material before the jury who were aware that he had these particular predilections, and he was convicted. However, Keith, sorry if I'm boring you.
Fascinating.
There was an interesting twist in the case, in a way, which was this, that the defense wanted to say complete accident. We, the prosecution, said, no, you're a murderer. But in fact, there's a middle ground between those two, which is whether if he had in fact done this during the course of some consensual sex act, then he could be guilty of manslaughter, because there are things you can do during consensual activities together which don't harm people. But if it goes beyond minimal harm, then that is deemed as unacceptable, and you could either be convicted of an assault if somebody survives, or you could be convicted of manslaughter if somebody dies. So it's not that he tried to kill her, it's just that happened to happen during the course of it. And so we went to the Court of Appeal, and they said to the defense, on all their grounds of appeal, no. And then very bizarrely, it went to the House of Lords, as was now called the Supreme Court. And the House of Lords said, regardless of the fact that neither the defense nor the prosecution wanted that middle ground to be left, nevertheless, there is an obligation on a judge to leave the middle ground, to leave that option to a jury and order a retrial. And the case of Crown against Coutts is the leading case on that very point. And I deal with it quite often, where there's an allegation of something really very serious, and the defense say, no, it's nothing at all. But still, as a judge nowadays, since that case, has an obligation to consider whether or not there might be some other offence that the jury would consider as a possibility between the two. So he got retried, and with a different team apart from me. I'm the only person who has prosecuted Coutts twice, and if I may say, successfully twice. We went to the Old Bailey, and we had the trial there, Court 1 at the Old Bailey, which, if you ever get the chance to go to the Old Bailey, it's not quite as lovely as Lewis, but I'd certainly recommend it. And after another lengthy trial there, he was convicted, and again he received life imprisonment and, as I recall, 26 years minimum term. But I strongly doubt that he will ever come out, certainly under his own name. But let me just say this also, because not only did it have legal consequences, that case, Coutts, it also has this effect. Liz Longhurst, Elizabeth Longhurst, Jane's mother, is a remarkable lady. And as a consequence of her daughter's death, and I have to say, she dealt with the whole thing with enormous dignity. She was just an absolute rock for the rest of her family. But she then campaigned in relation to the sort of images that Coutts had been looking at. And amongst other people, but she was a prime mover in it, she persuaded Parliament to make it illegal to possess what's called extreme pornography, which includes an image of somebody being hurt in some way in a sexual context, and things like that. So exactly the sort of thing that he was looking at. So thanks to her, and it really is thanks to her, the law has changed in a way that is, I'm sure, better for all of us. And that, Keith, is the story of Graham Coutts.
What year did this happen? What year did this happen?
He killed her in 2003, Easter 2000, or no, March 2003. Disposed of the body in Easter 2003. Tried in 2004, as I say, here at Lewes, and then retried about 18 months later up at the Bailey.
Well, what was the reason that it would move from the Crown Court here to the Old Bailey on the second one?
Well, the original trial was dealt with by the then senior judge here. And obviously it was his decision that the House of Lords said they didn't agree with about not leaving another, that middle charge. There's that, but also it had received such massive local publicity. Sometimes cases get moved for that reason, because it's deemed that not that a defendant won't get a fair trial, but it's the perception of fairness that's important. And so that's why we went up to the Old Bailey to deal with it. And
now, how did you come to prosecute in the first instance?
Because, Keith, I'm the best barrister in the world.
Well, I know that.
No, it was just Sussex Crown Prosecution Service decided that they wanted me to take on the case.
Right. Here's my coffee. It's
very touch of brandy in it, I hope. Yeah.
Well, I hope so too. I mean, it's the only way to have coffee in the morning. But when it moved to the Old Bailey, you say you were the only member of the prosecuting team to move. Was it because you prosecuted the original case, or some matter of chance?
No. It was for what it's worth, the Crown Prosecution Service wanted to keep me on the case because I dealt with it and I knew about it, and I hope they think I did a good job. I suppose that's part of the reason. I may be completely wrong. I think most of the other people who were involved in that case as barristers are now judges one way or another, which is, good luck to them.
Yeah, you said you never want to be a judge.
No, I'm waiting for my next one. Exactly. Yeah. And in fact, as you know, Keith, I've got a jury out somewhere today, so I'm at some point I'm going to need to link in just to And I've got a very kind judge who said that I could do that remotely, which is, this is a wonderful system. Without COVID, it might not have happened, but many of my cases now, short hearings or things like that, I can do from here, and I've got my dog in the background, and I can sunshine of Lewis.
What could a man ask for? Let me ask you this: when you first clapped eyes on Coots, did you get any sense of the man was evil or normal, or what was your first impression?
No, he looked perfectly normal. I could quite see how he could have got away with what he was. Sorry, one of the things I should have mentioned, and I forgot to say this, is that he had the advantage of a retrial. And by the time we had the retrial, the law had changed in relation to what I told you about bad character evidence. So that nowadays, if somebody has either acted criminally or in a way that's considered reprehensible, then the prosecution can apply to adduce evidence about that. In the same way, in fact, that the defense can apply to do it about a prosecution witness. It used to be the case that defense were just able to put anything in like that about a prosecution witness. They can't do that now. So it's a level playing field. Everybody needs to make an application if you want to put bad character. Coots's problem, and I do remember, because in fact it was the very early days of having screens in court. He was in prison, and we were at the Bailey doing a sort of preliminary hearing. So you could just see, and he was sitting there, a massive screen. And it clearly hadn't crossed his mind, or he hadn't been told, that, in fact, now, mate, all of your computer stuff is going in as evidence. We're going to have everything. And he just sort of, he blanched, rather, if I may say, because he hadn't realized that he now suffered from the change in law in relation to that. But no, Keith, I tell you, because he gave evidence as well. He was, you'd be more than glad to sit down with your coffee and have a drink of coffee with him, on the face of it, because he was a very plausible character, and had clearly hidden this deeply unpleasant side to him from everybody, including his partner.
Right. So now, appearing at the Old Bailey, later in the week, we're going to have the pleasure of you talking to Wendy Joseph, Lady Wendy Joseph, QC, who was, or I think she's retired now, is she not?
Yes, she has retired.
An Old Bailey judge. And when I first saw her, a diminutive little thing, and yet you could see the charisma and the fire in the persona. How did you find her as an interviewee?
Oh no, well, of course she is a very strong woman, and I admire that. Very well respected as a judge. She has, since retirement last year, she's commentated on various things. She's in relation to the law, and she's keen to keep things progressing at the bar, in particular in relation to diversity, women, ethnic minorities, etc. And I've, as an interviewee, I found her compelling, frankly. I could have, you Keith, stopped me after about half an hour, and I understand why. But I could have carried on talking to her for another hour.
Well, there's no reason why, and I will leave this up to you to contact her, that you can't do a remote interview and do another half hour, because she was fascinating, and obviously there was enough material there for another half hour. So please feel free to do so, and we can arrange a time when the two of you are mutually available, and we'll follow that up, because sitting on the sidelines, I was fascinated with the interview as well. And I think, yes, there is more to come out of that. So feel free.
I'll see what I can do, certainly.
All right. Right. Well, we have been, we've gone 35 minutes this morning, fascinating 35 minutes. I'm glad that you got called away, because we got a real screw up at the start. The system seems to have settled down now, but we didn't have Philip this morning. For what reason?
Well, Philip, or as he used to be known, the Ginger Whinger and Eeyore. To be fair to him, sometimes his health means that he's not able to do things. But I'm confident we'll get him later in the week, because I know he has things he'd like to tell you about.
Yes.
Keith.
Well, I'm posting this as the 2 Bs now. Read into that what you will. Richard, good to have you, and I hope that the case goes well. You're not going down to Chichester; you're going to sit at home and talk to them over the web.
I wouldn't go to Chichester anyway, Keith, because that's not where the case is. I'm not going to tell you where it is, but anyway, there we go.
Very, very well. Let's put it: the case that is not in Chichester.
That's exactly that. Yes, the famous Agatha Christie story, the case that's not in Chichester.
We'll talk to you later in the week.
Lovely to see you, Keith. Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.